he's aiming for GOAT status as a director. He's super good at what he does, super creative. Maybe sometimes he doesn't always hit the mark exactly where he wants to hit the mark, but I personally think he does a damn good job. I think he's super funny and creative. I've been watching him and his buddy Key on the Key and Peele thing. They do these really viral comedy skits, and I just think it's good. And so anyway, we went to see the movie last night, and of course, I just saw so many just powerful messages in this film. With my wife being a therapist, um, she also saw a lot of messages regarding the subconscious mind, right? So she's into that. And I saw that too, but I also saw like the financial message, the cultural message, things like that. So what I thought I would do as we start Monday in the morning is I said, it would be kind of fun to sort of go through the theme of that movie and really talk about what that means in terms of culture and just how sports, generally speaking, sports has been such a ripoff to the black community. Unfortunately, even though we have some of the best athletes and we have a lot of success stories, we also have a lot of tragedies that are connected to sports. A lot of economic tragedies, personal tragedies, tragedies that relate to addiction, tragedies that relate to baby mama itis, tragedies that relate to uh, maybe all the brain damage that happens in professional football in particular, and how we probably overlook a lot of that actually. I mean, once I became hip to what CTE does to the brain and how the human brain is not meant to skulls are not meant to crash into each other like that. It started making sense of just some of the behavior that you might see when you see an athlete do something that's kind of crazy. It could be because of the brain damage. In fact, I believe that in many cases it is, and I think one day that'll be acknowledged. I don't know if they ever will, but I thought that I would go through and really connect the dots on the economic side because I know a lot of you have kids that play football. Like my poor mother, I drove her crazy because I love football and I wanted to be a professional football player. I wanted to play for the Dallas Cowboys. Again, pray for me because that's a little ignorant. And I would beg her to let me go play football. And even back then, before they really talked about the brain damage side, she was just like, "No, you're not playing football. I don't want you to get paralyzed or hurt or anything like that." And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't play. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I don't do that. But I do remember in 2012, I think it was 2012, Jesse Jackson's guy. It was a guy who was his second in command. He was a bishop. I can't remember his name, but he was a great guy. He asked me to go visit this brother that was in the hospital. He was a former football star in high school, and he I can't remember his name. I think his name was Curtis. I can't remember his last name, but it was like probably about 2011, 2012. And he was a star on the football team. And at the age of 18, he got paralyzed from the neck down. And so when he got paralyzed, everybody told him, hey, we're going to take care of you. You'll be you'll be okay for life. We've got insurance policies, stuff like that. We'll pay for all your medical care, whatever. Well, the problem with the insurance policy was that the policy was based on his medical expenses not exceeding a certain amount of money. I think it was $1 million. Also, it was based on the expectation that he was going to be dead in 3 or 4 years. That's how grim it was. Imagine that you're 18, your life is just getting started, and people expect you to die you know, in 4 years. That I cannot imagine how that felt for his poor family. So anyway, so here's what happened. So one of the reason that Reverend Jackson's family asked me to intervene is because the medical coverage was about to come to an end, and of course, all the people who are shedding tears for you and praying for you and everything, 13 years earlier. They're not going to be there now. They're not going to be there when you really need them. And by this time, this poor guy was 31 years old and he had been literally paralyzed from the neck down since he was 18. Just, I mean, imagine that. Imagine, I mean, when you're that age, you're young, you got energy, you're living life, you're having all these experiences. But he spent that 13-year period from age 18 to 31 in a bed where he couldn't move anything below here, and his mother had to feed him, and they had to have a machine connected just to help him swallow his food, right? And his mother Being the great mother that she was, like any mother, she was right there by his side the entire time. And I remember being in that room, and I remember shedding tears, like as I was just listening to him and his mother go back and forth. And he was telling me about his experience. And this guy had done about as much as you could do being paralyzed from the neck down. You would think that being paralyzed from the neck down means you can't do anything, but he was really resourceful. He actually was coaching football for a little while, and he'd come out and not be able to move any part of his body, but he would just talk to the kids about sports or whatever, which is kind of an interesting thing, right? But anyway, long story short, so as his insurance policy was running out, he was reaching that $1 million cap. The hospital said, after you hit your limit, you got to go. We can't take care of you anymore. We can't keep him hooked up to machines. Basically, you're going to die because you don't have enough money. That's what it was. And so we were fighting, and I was like, this is crazy. This is unbelievable, etc. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I remember, I've never talked about this before in public. I remember him begging his mother to just let him die. He told me, he said, I asked my mother, like, just go ahead and pull the plug, let me die. And she was like, no, no, I don't want that for you. No, I know, I want you. And honestly, I got a feeling that she wasn't keeping him alive for him. She kept him alive for herself. She needed him to be alive. So it was more so about what the mother wanted than what he wanted. He was like, I just want to go ahead and get this over with. And just to face something like that at that age, I mean, it just affected me. I went to the bathroom. I just cried. I couldn't. It was too much, right? So the thing is, I'm not here to scare anybody when it comes to sports, but I am here to just be honest about it, right? I'm not saying don't do it, right? Because a lot of people play and they're fine and it's okay, but I think full knowledge would be beneficial, right? And I think a full understanding of all the things that can happen and whether or not you're willing to take that chance is a big deal. Like I remember how affected I was when I met the guy that played for the I keep wanting to say Sterling Sharp, but that's not his name. It was he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He won a Super Bowl and he was like man of the year and he played for Indiana. Antoine Randall L. Antoine Randall L. I'll never forget meeting him that day we gave that speech together or we were on that panel and he was telling me about how many of his friends can't remember like their relatives' names or would go pick up their kid from school and can't remember how to get home or would just because they were taking cracks to the head. And he was talking about like he was talking about other people, but he was actually talking about himself. A year later, he was on the cover of USA Today, literally saying, I wish I'd never played football. And that was kind of crazy. I said, whoa, wait, this guy won a Super Bowl. He lived all my dreams. He lived all my every dream I had as a kid. He lived it. He played in the Super Bowl. He was a star for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He done all these things, and I was kind of when I was talking to him, I felt like I missed out. Like I was like, man, wait a minute, this guy's not any bigger than me. Like maybe I could have played in the NFL or something. But this is what this says to me, and as I think about the movie Him, is I think that what Jordan Peele was really getting at is that sometimes you get what you want, your greatest dreams come true, but you're really kind of making a deal with the devil sometimes, right? I'm not saying this is true of all people that play sports. I know a lot of y'all love sports. Maybe you're a football coach or something. I was a track coach, so I love the big sports for me are basketball, football, and track. Those were the three, in high school that I wanted to play or thought about playing, and I did track for 4 years. Football, I didn't want to be out in the hot sun and get hit all day. And then basketball, Allen Houston was our guard on the basketball team. I'm 5'8". He's 6'5", going to the NBA. I can't take his spot, right? So, but still though, I get it. I understand. I respect it. But I think that the black community probably needs to have conversations about the hidden costs of sports and the sacrifice, right? Like so in this movie, him I think the name of the team that he followed was called the Saints. And they would talk about making, and his father would say, you got to make the sacrifice if you want to be a man. Like all these little subconscious messages that really connect to these deals with the devil, where we just say, you sacrifice, how bad do you want it? Or what are you willing to give up to get it? I'm willing to give up everything. Right. And so suddenly the devil shows up with a tray full of your wildest dreams. The devil shows up with a tray full of dope and you literally feel like, oh my God, God is blessing me. But remember, as D1 always says, the devil can bless you too. And so sometimes you think that it's a blessing from God. You get drafted by your favorite team and you're standing up at the podium saying, I'd like to thank my mama and thank God for this. And you think that the blessing came from God. But my question is, honestly, I'm thinking, did that really come from God? Or are you making a deal with the devil and you don't even know it? So that's what him kind of taps into. And so what I thought I would do is in terms of making this an economic lesson that you may want to share with your sons as they make decisions, as they decide which direction to go in life. I actually put together a mind map that I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to share my screen, and I want to go through the experience of professional athletes and this deal with the devil and how financial consciousness can help you to calibrate how you negotiate that deal. Right? I'm not saying people shouldn't play sports. Give me a yes if you understand this. And I'm not hating on you and your football team. I'm not telling you that you're a sucker for playing sports. None of that. Okay, give me a yes if we can agree on that because I want to make this clear. I don't want anybody thinking that Dr. Boyce thinks every black kid that plays football is stupid. That's how people misinterpret things. That's not what I'm saying. I just want you to process things so that you make the decision that works for you. So let's start with athletic temptation, and I picked up on a lot of this when I was working the desk at the dorm at the University of Kentucky, and I remember noticing how different the lives of our basketball players were from our lives. Like me, I was a regular broke ass college student, 5'8". I had to work hard to get a pretty girlfriend, right? I couldn't just walk around and be 6'5" and be the big man on campus and have all the girls bowing at my feet. I had to work hard to get a girlfriend, right? And personally, I think I was a good catch in the sense that when a guy has to work hard for you, he's gonna value you. Do you see what I'm saying? Things that you have to work hard for, dig for, fight for, compete for, those are the things you value more. If something's just handed to you, then you're not perceived as the outcome isn't perceived as precious or as meaningful or as relevant. So at that time, I would see these beautiful girls just running in and out of the dorm. I mean, one guy would have 4 or 5 women come in the same night. It was fast. It was really fast, and I was like, man, I didn't know people lived like this. And I remember thinking, God, I would give anything just to date one of y'all, but y'all are getting what in economics they call that the winner's curse, right? So you're all competing for this same guy, and then even if you win the competition, you're still going to lose because you might be dealing with a man who has all these other issues, right? Like there was that one player that played for Kentucky, Winston Bennett, who publicly stated that he was a sex addict and he would have sex with 90 women a month. And so so a really beautiful lady, she wins the competition and ends up marrying him. And this dude was sleeping with women on during the honeymoon. Like they were on a cruise. He slept with 2 or 3 women on the cruise because there's something about that, those tall, like something about tall guys. I don't know what it is. Evolutionary. It's really fascinating to watch. So anyway, so she won the prize, but then you could say she also lost, right? She got the booby prize. So a lot of times consciousness allows you to make those decisions and really see all of the side effects and externalities that come with that decision as opposed to making the shallow superficial decision that so many people make that leads you to think that if I date this rapper or this athlete, I'm going to necessarily win. When I wrote Financial Lovemaking when I was on the faculty of Syracuse, I remember talking to women who married professional athletes and they ended up broke. They ended up broke baby mamas in their 30s because unfortunately in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, the poor guy couldn't do anything other than play basketball. So when you took basketball away, then suddenly you've got an unemployed husband who doesn't have anything else that he can do. So this is why these conscious decisions have to be talked about in families so that you can end up where you want to be. All right. So let's talk about athlete temptations and financial ruin. I got this mind map here. This is really cool. I want to show you. I want to break this out for you. So let's start with some of the basics. Let's talk about oops. This thing just blew up on me and spiraled out of control. Hold on, let's start here with some of the key areas. I'm gonna break this back down again. All right, so here you have basically the first theme, which is culture and wealth. Culture and wealth. Now, you've heard me talk about this. I talk about it extensively in my book, The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. That wealth is culture, culture is wealth. You cannot build wealth in an anti-wealth culture. It's simple as saying if I go to a racist town that hates black people, you're probably not going to see a lot of black faces in high places because the very environment is anti-black. Do you understand? By having an anti-black population, anti-black government, anti-black police department, the odds of a black person rising to the top of that town are extremely low. So culture and wealth are connected. I talk about this a lot in my book, The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. So let's go down that rabbit hole really quick and kind of think this through. All right. So here, when you talk specifically about professional athletes, let me see. Wait, gosh, dang it. Hold on, guys. Let me fix this. It all worked perfectly when I did it before class, and now it's all messing up. All right, so here we go. Let me fix this. All right, so here you can go into fame and fortune, which tends to, unfortunately, it amplifies a lot of temptations. And this is really, really problematic, I think, for young guys, because I know that if when I was 19 or 20 or 21, if you suddenly given me access to everything I wanted and I was not spiritually grounded, I'd never had anybody tell me who I really am. I'd never had anybody tell me about the importance of moderation in the face of temptation. I could easily, just like a lot of us, be caught, in some of these traps. So fame and fortune, unfortunately, that I think of it as a deal with the devil because you literally have every temptation, every desire fulfilled. If your desire is women, you got that. If you want to hang out and do drugs, and you got plenty of drugs. Money itself is a drug, which can open the door to other drugs. That's why you see so many poor guys sort of fall down this trap. Also, a lack of financial consciousness can destroy your wealth, health, and relationships. We know these things. So let's move on. Let's talk about the core areas of temptation. The four areas that can bring a black man down, tell your sons this is really important, are sex, drugs, alcohol, and gambling. If any of those four areas are not managed properly and done in moderation, then any of those four things can destroy you. These are the four sub demons that can come along. These are like the devil's advocates, if you will, or the devil's assistants that can really destroy you. So let's start with sex. Let's look at that. Let's look at what happens when you engage in sexual behavior in a way that does not value or cherish the experience, and opens this Pandora's box of all these outcomes. Right? Shannon Sharp could probably tell you about this one too. All right. So first of all, let's talk about the risks of excessive sexual behavior. Number one, you got multiple relationships, lots of babies, mamas, lots of women fighting over you, and then it only takes one crazy one to destroy everything, destroy your wealth, get you kicked off the team, get you ruined. Years ago, when I used to write for AOL Black Voices, and I got that call about the group of women that would literally research professional athletes and rappers, and they would lure them in by, they show them a big booty or something, and they'd be like all hypnotized because their consciousness is very low, and they would get them into a hotel room, and then they would put a date rape in his drug, and while he was asleep, they would put him in the bed with a 15-year-old girl, take pictures, and then they blackmail him when he woke up, and then they'd say, we've got pictures of you in bed with the 15-year-old. If you don't give us $10,000, we're gonna call your team, we're gonna call the media, and we're also gonna call your wife. And so basically, you're just, it's easy, right? And there are so many people who say, oh yeah, these men are dumb. In fact, there was a lady, I forgot her name. She just married that rapper and then divorced him like 6 months later. But that was quite predictable. I can't really tell me her name. I forgot her name. But anyway, she was on the internet and she literally said, if you want to make $1 million, just go sleep with an athlete. She said they're dumb, they don't use condoms, and they have lots of money. So as I always told you, that one of the biggest rules of wealth is wealth protection. And there's that old saying that a fool and his money will soon part ways. So if you are sitting on a lot of resources and you're not strategic, you're not disciplined, you're not conscious of your surroundings, then somebody's eventually going to conspire to take your money because having lots of money makes you a big target. So you got other things, child support obligations. There are lots of athletes who've been hit by that. You have divorce settlements, which can be very expensive. That'll destroy your wealth very quickly, destroy your generational wealth, and then exploitation by outsiders. All the homies and the entourage that want to hang out with you now that you have money. Money will buy you lots of friends. Since I got money, a lot of people want to be my friend, and I know exactly why. All right, so the next thing, if you talk about the financial impact in particular, you child support is a big drainer. Child support will destroy you. Child support's hard because it's a fixed expense that isn't really going to change that much, even when you're making less money, and that's what the dilemma of child support. Divorces and legal fees, reputational damage as well, lost endorsements. So you get caught in a sex scandal. If you notice, Shannon Sharp didn't just lose the 20 million or whatever he gave to this little girl on OnlyFans. If you notice, if you watch Club Shay Shay, you'll see a lot of those corporate sponsors are gone. Like the Club Shay Shay ain't Club Shay Shay no more. It just looks like a dude with a podcast. And before he had all these different brands that were partnering and collaborating with him, and I guarantee you a lot of that went out the window. All right, so let's look at some quick examples. Very simple. I'm not here making fun of anybody, but if you want to look up some stuff to kind of just think about as frames of reference, Allen Iverson, I think, is an example. He had an expensive divorce. He also had a big issue with a lot of other vices that, in my view, destroyed a lot of generational wealth. I think Allen Iverson could be worth $500 million. Instead, the only good thing he has going on is this Reebok deal where he's going to get $50 million in about 3 or 4 years. But even that deal, when I broke down the mathematics of it, wasn't a great deal. And if you ever want to see that, just look up Boyce Watkins and Allen Iverson on YouTube, and you'll see my analysis of the deal from a present value, future value standpoint. Adidas or Reebok, I think it was Reebok. Sorry, I said Adidas. Reebok really got over. They that was a great deal for them. It was good for him in the sense that it protected him from himself, where he had to wait 30 years or something to get a bunch of money. But for Reebok, from a time value of money perspective, meaning when you factor in the amount of time and what they could do with that money during that time, they actually, in my view, got an amazing deal. All right, so Travis Henry is another guy. He was a great player in the NFL. He has 11 kids. His child support's out of control, and he's gone to court basically saying he's broke and he needs help with his child support. And let's talk about dopamine. I always think everything comes back to dopamine manipulation, and dopamine is kind of a natural drug that your brain produces when you make money or when you become famous or when you date a pretty girl. And so basically, fame just amplifies the temptation and builds up that dopamine resistance where you have to go to more and more extremes in order to have what you want. A lot of people miss this. I only spoke to LL Cool J one time, and the one time I spoke to him, it was a conversation arranged by Russell Simmons because LL was having an issue, and Russell felt like I would be a good person for him to talk to. We talked for just a few minutes. He's very nice, and I like it when people listen and do what I ask them to do, and or at least consider it. And he actually listened. Some people I won't talk to because I don't even think if I don't think they're going to listen, I don't waste my time. I'd rather talk to you because I know a lot of you listen, and I appreciate that. And so, anyway, with LL, if I'm not mistaken, I believe in his book he talked about something related to sex, and he said something about like I wanted to have sex with anything, no matter what it was, right? Like I would put my penis into anything. He said something like that, something very broad. Like I'm like, oh, there's a lot of stuff you could be putting your junk into. Really? And I thought about that, and I said, well, think about this, right? You're LL Cool J. You're a sex symbol from the age of 17. All the girls love you. I'd hate to see what that body count looks like, right? And also, anything that makes you happy, eventually you become immune to it. It just wears off. Like okay, I've had sex with 10,000 women. Then they're like, I wonder what it's like to sleep with a guy or with a monkey or whatever, right? Or 10 girls, whatever it is, right? You see people get into more and more extreme behavior because they need that heavy rush. They need that extra dopamine. They can't regular stuff. This is the hard thing about celebrities. Will Smith talked about this very accurately. And I like Will. I told you Will's such a smart guy. Um, and he said if I was to give anybody a gift in this room, I would like for you to know what it's like to have whatever you want. He said, I would love for you to just have that experience of having all the money in the world, all the fame, all the power, all the women. And then what he said, what you'll find, and I love the fact that he shared this, is he said you'll find that eventually all that wears off. It doesn't do anything for you anymore. And the only way you can find your happiness is internally. You have to, and that's a spiritual process. You have to be grounded in something that money can't buy. You have to be connected to something that gives you some sort of higher vibrational peace other than just I'm gonna go have sex with another person, I'm gonna go spend money, or I'm gonna go whatever, because eventually that stuff wears off. Tolerance levels. I saw somebody mention that in the chat. That's exactly what it is. So with athletes, that's why I feel bad for them because they're so young and they don't know these things, and they just think, oh, another party, another whatever is gonna do it, and it doesn't work. Deion Sanders often talks about how he was one of the biggest, most famous athletes on earth, and he wanted to take his own life. Like, what would make you want to take your own life if you're doing that well, right? And speaking of Deion Sanders, I realized something today. I did not. I talked to my wife about it because I was like, I need you to do a psychoanalysis on how this happened. I have one jersey on my wall. I have one jersey on my wall in my office, and no other jerseys. And that's Deion Sanders, 21, when he played for the Cowboys. It's a signed jersey by Prime. I never met Coach Prime, but it is signed. and because Cowboys were my favorite team, and he was one of my favorite players in the Cowboys. And I walked by the jersey today, and I looked up at it, and it says Sanders on the back, and I said, "That's right. My biological father, his name was Boyce Sanders." I never made that connection before. I never connected the fact that Deion Sanders and I have the same last name. I didn't. Isn't that's insane, right? That's my father, right? But I didn't know my father, so I never identified as a Sanders. So I would see Deion Sanders, and I would think of the Sanders family as different from my family. Isn't that weird? So I told my wife, I was like, I need you to help me understand how on a subconscious level two levels. One, how did I not notice that? How did I only make that connection literally 20 minutes ago? And then two, do you think that it subconsciously is what led to me buying that jersey? Isn't that interesting? She always says in every movie, it's always like somebody looking for their father. Like even the movie Him was all about his dad. His dad died and he played football because he was trying to make his dad happy and proud and all. Right? Everything's about your father, right? So this is crazy. So I need y'all to help me break that down one day. But I'm not gonna bore you with that. I just had to share that. I thought that's not even relevant to what we're talking about. But I mean, shit. Okay, so anyway, all right, so here, let's keep going here. So let's talk about drugs and what that can do in terms of destroying you financially and harming you. A lot of you probably can guess some of these things, but so I'll go through this kind of quickly. If you look at the risks of drugs, you're talking about substance abuse addiction, long-term body brain damage, league suspensions or bans. All these things can be impactful for an athlete because it's all going to affect your ability to earn income. Drugs just overall are just so bad, right? For your finances. Then if you talk about the financial impact, you got rehab, that's expensive, medical expenses that come with that, long-term inability to work, loss of contracts, fines, early termination. A couple good examples out there would be Josh Gordon, who was a super talented wide receiver that played in the NFL a few years ago, but unfortunately drugs just really ruined things for him. There's another guy named Diego Maradona who also had an addiction. He was a soccer player, and he ended up losing a lot of wealth because of that. Now, in terms of dopamine, just so you know, dopamine basically comes up. Drugs are kind of crazy because I looked up one time, I researched, like, I was like, what's the difference in the dopamine spike between like smoking crack and having sex? And basically, the problem with crack, this is why crack is whack, Whitney was right, is that basically the effect of crack is about 3 to 4 times great, really probably 3 to 5 times stronger than the effect of sex, right? That's bad enough, right? So imagine sex on steroids. That's kind of what crack is. Crack is just like like a whole different level. So even sex doesn't isn't interesting anymore. I guess if you're smoking crack. But the second part of it too is that because your body and your brain naturally are aware that too much stimulation is not good for you, it has mechanisms that shut it down. Like so that's why when you have sex and it's really good, you're really euphoric for about 60 seconds, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, that's it. With crack, it just kind of keeps going. Like it can keep going for an hour or whatever, and you're at this sort of super crazy high, and then you suddenly just bam, you just crash, and what they said is that it then ruins the circuitry in your brain. It destroys. So even when you come back from a drug addiction, this is why I want you to be careful about falling in love with what I call Negro comeback stories, where we love to hear about somebody who was rock bottom and then they made a comeback, or they made a lot of mistakes and then they fixed it. I think that's all admirable. But the best way to fix a mistake, we all know, is to avoid it in the first place, because drug addictions don't just impact they don't just impact you in the moment, they impact you even after the addiction's over. Like when your brain circuitry has been rewired and totally screwed up, it can be very difficult for you to come back to normal. And that's where a lot of psychosis comes from. So when someone will say, so let's say you have somebody that was on heavy drugs and then they got off the drugs and then they say they've got a mental illness, bipolar disorder or whatever, and then I'll hear someone say, well, it wasn't the drugs, he just has a mental illness. I always say, well, do you know that there's a connection, right? That if you did have a drug addiction, the chances of a mental illness go up because your chemistry has been altered for life permanently. Some of these drugs are really, really horrifically dangerous to the point where even experimentation can't it could destroy you for life, right? You look at what fentanyl does, people sleeping, standing up with all that crazy stuff, the zombie effect. You look at crack and also meth related drugs. We know. So really, I think having honest conversations with your kids about these things is extremely important because I just hate the idea of somebody ruining their lives at the age of 17. You got so much of your life left to live. All right, so let's get back here. But I'm not here to be preachy. I want to make that clear. I'm just here to share what I know. All right, so here's the second part. If you look at alcohol, first off, if you look at the risks of alcohol, there's things like DUIs, arrests, violent domestic violence incidents, Negroes getting shot at the club. Every time somebody gets shot at the club, there's always a liquor bottle somewhere around. And then next thing you know, somebody's got 30 years in prison. You ain't gonna make no wealth while you're in prison. They're gonna have you working as a slave for $1 a day as you're dodging people that are trying to take your manhood every day. And then also, if you're talking about domestic violence, a lot of domestic violence incidents happen with drugs and alcohol. So one little thing that isn't discussed very often, in my opinion, is I think that if your goal is to be a good role model for your kids, I think that being thoughtful about how you integrate drugs or alcohol into your life is important, right? Alicia, my wife does drink a little bit, not a lot. She doesn't drink regularly, but like if we go to a party, she'll have a drink. I don't drink at all. And she said, well, why don't you drink? A lot of people drink. It's not a big deal. And I said, well, because I don't ever want to do something out of character and lose face in front of the children. I feel like it's very important that I set a good example. So I'm not going to do anything that's going to have me acting like crazy voice. Claymation voice is bad enough. He's already messing up my reputation. Y'all seen claymation voice, but the real voice, I kind of need him to just stay cool and avoid things that can be mind altering. My mind is an asset, right? My mind has allowed me to go places and do things and build wealth or whatever it is, right? So why would I even tinker with that? I don't want to tinker with that, right? So, but that's the thought process, right? So, and so it does come back to wealth, though, but also it comes back to things that money can't buy. Also, with alcohol, it's been linked to things like cancer, dementia. Those are big issues. I know people who've gotten alcohol-induced dementia in their 60s and 70s where they can't remember things because the alcohol really does destroy your brain. Just look it up if you don't believe me. All right, so the financial impact. If you're talking about drinking a lot, you can run into legal issues, DUI, stuff like that. It's an athlete, for example, you would definitely lose contracts and endorsements if you get into a bad situation. I think Tiger Woods had an issue, but it wasn't alcohol. It was actually pills. I think he had a big issue with pills. A lot of athletes, a lot of professional football players have to take lots of pills just to numb the pain so they can keep playing because in their deal with the devil, their goal is to win at all costs, and you're glorified for being willing to sacrifice any and everything in order for you to win the game in that moment. Ongoing medical expenses and health issues that will drain your bank account very quickly. In fact, staying healthy is going to increase your wealth tremendously because that's a much lower cost in terms of medication and surgeries and all this other stuff. And then you go into examples. Vin Baker was a great basketball player who lost over $100 million because he couldn't walk away from alcohol. This guy named Tony Adams, I think he played soccer or something like that. His career was disrupted. And the dopamine angle of this comes from culture, party culture. So when I was at Syracuse University, I noticed very quickly that we produce more. It seems like we produce more alcoholics than college graduates. Like there was just sort of this embraced idea that says that something that it makes sense to for 18-year-olds to black out from drinking every weekend and to just do all kinds of crazy stuff. So you had all these effects. You had, kids getting raped. You had kids getting arrested. You had people getting into fights in bad situations because of alcohol. And then you had the health effects. I've seen people that are alcoholics in their 50s because they took their first drink on a college campus. So really, with alcohol, and again, I'm not being preachy here. If you get your drink, drink your drink. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to just say that if you don't think there's a connection between alcohol and your economics, there's a big connection, not just from the cost of the liquor, it's from the cost of the choices that come after you drink the liquor, right? Getting pregnant by the wrong man, the health effects, having to go running back and forth to the doctor, taking medication because your body's been destroyed by this stuff. So alcohol, and then also a reputational damage. If you're talking about an athlete, so circling back to the movie Him, look at how many times you've had athletes lose their entire contract because of something that they did while they were drunk. right? So alcohol, if you take it out of your life, that's one less thing you have to worry about, and it's just something to think about. Now, gambling, that's another area I've seen destroy a lot of athletes. Iverson, I know, did a lot of gambling. The interesting thing, let's start with the dopamine effect of and the dopamine angle. Basically, what the one of the what one of the, what the research shows is that a lot of athletes love to gamble because it mirrors the adrenaline rush of competitive sports, right? Michael Jordan was a notorious gambler, and I don't know how many millions of dollars he's lost. It appears that he's still doing okay, like he's got enough money to afford that. A lot of the guys he gambled with, in my view, did not have the money to keep up with Michael, but because they had an admiration for Michael, they saw Michael as a mentor. If your mentor is destroying his life, you might think that that's okay, right? And it's very hard to sit next to Michael Jordan and be on a team playing with him and have him invite you to gamble and you not feel the need to participate, right? So this is where grounding comes into play. Grounding is what keeps you from connecting to bad culture. If you're grounded, you say, yeah, that's what those guys are doing, but I'm not participating in that because that's not how I was raised, or that's not what I believe. And you're comfortable standing up to people who might want to make fun of you because you won't participate. Guys go through this all the time. And think about it, if you're an athlete, you want to be part of the brotherhood. You want to be respected by your teammates. And sometimes though, you may be asked to do things that are fundamentally unhealthy in order to do that. And the best gift I ever had was the ability to say, no, I'm sorry, no, excuse my French, but I'd say fuck off. Like if you're trying to get me to ruin my life like you, I'm not doing that. I'm not participating. That's not happening. We got to be friends on some other foundation because if you're asking me to do things that are going to destroy me, like so many other millions of black men in America, look at how many millions of men could be something greater than what they were, right? Raise your hand if you know at least one black man in your life that could have been great, but one of these four things, drugs, alcohol, sex, or gambling, threw him off the rails. Everybody put a yes in the chat if you know at least one black man where this has happened to, right? And so if you care about the black man and you want the black man to be his best, you got to talk about this. You cannot sweep it under the rug, act like it didn't happen. You got to confront the issue. You got to deal with the backlash. Oh, you being preachy and is it? No, I'm sorry. I told you when I was in New York at D1's thing, I met a great brother who was the founder of the group Rough Riders. First thing I said to him after we talked was, I said, DMX should be alive and he should be a billionaire. If he'd gotten help, he'd be a billionaire right now. And I like the guy a lot, and I don't know how he felt about it. I didn't ask. I didn't care. I liked him though. I liked him a lot, and I want to make that's clear. So in case he sees this or something, but really, I was like, when I see DMX, I see $1 billion in black wealth that went away because he could not walk away from the drugs. And whoever introduced him to the drugs should be shot, in my opinion. Somebody should find that person and kick them in their ass. You introduced a 14-year-old to drugs, and if you remember DMX's story about drugs, he said that the person that introduced him to cocaine was his mentor. His fucking mentor. Excuse my God, I'm cussing. I'm sorry. This makes me angry. This really. So you got this kid who is going to become one of the most influential artists in the history of hip hop, one of the biggest artists on earth. So you got the solemn opportunity to mentor somebody who can change the freaking world. And because no one introduced you to consciousness or how to consciously observe and respect the opportunity that God put in front of you, you just get him hooked on cocaine when he's 14 years old, when his brain can't even properly regulate itself. His prefrontal cortex isn't even fully developed yet. His brain is like still growing, and he gets introduced to the unbelievable high of excessive dopamine levels. So you destabilize this kid at 14 years old, and then he spends the next 40 years in complete agony, highs to lows, ups and downs. And who knows, maybe those ups and downs made his music better, right? When DMX rapped, a lot of people felt like he touched their soul, and I get it, because he was probably in a lot of pain a lot. He wanted to be someone different from what he was. That's what I picked up. But in my view, it's just such a loss, and it's so sad, and it really goes back to that culture. So here's one thing I'll say, just forgive me if I sound preachy on this. I'm not trying to do this. I just want to be honest with you. If you get the opportunity to mentor a black child, please don't fuck it up. If you get the opportunity, if you got a kid that looks up to you and is like hanging on your every word and doing exactly what you say, please don't mess it up. Fix yourself. Go out and heal so you can be a better mentor. Deal with your own shit. Fix yourself. Half these kids get screwed up because They got parents that were screwed up, and the parents never took the time to fix themselves and heal. You're driving the car. You used to be a passenger in somebody else's car, and unfortunately, that passenger might have been driving drunk. They were blind behind the wheel and they crashed the car, and now you got all this trauma as a result of the fact that you had parents that crashed out, mentors that crashed out, people that didn't show up for you, and I get it. But now you're driving the damn car. Now you're the one that's behind the wheel. So you got to sober up. You need to fix whatever is holding you back, messing you up, so you can be a better guide to the young black children that want to follow you. So this is my, because here's the thing. Look, if we're all supposedly team black people and we want black wealth to grow and all this other stuff, you can't do this in a society or a culture full of mental instability and unhealthy people. It's not going to work. So let's go back. Let's jump into. So we talk about gambling. These are some of the ways that gambling can harm you financially, and we're talking specifically about athlete culture since we're talking about the movie Him. But you can see this applies in so many areas of other areas of life. So if you talk about things like physical and mental trauma, this is a big deal in professional football. A lot of the risks, you got the brain damage, stuff like that, chronic injury, CTE, long-term disability. NFL players die sooner than the general population because even though they're in extraordinary shape when their careers end, they have so much damage and just horrible hits to the body that can have a 30. I've seen 35-year-old guys walking around like they were 65. So you got to be mindful of that. And that becomes very expensive, right? All those visits to the doctor and maybe drug addictions that pop up as a result of that, stuff like that. The dopamine angle, let's look at that. Addictions, one thing about being an athlete and about having that power of the fame and fortune is that just the crowd's roar. You hear a lot of athletes that will talk about how addictive the roar of the crowd was. And so when they lose that, there's a lot of depression that can occur after that goes away. And so basically you push limits because you become so addicted to the crowd's approval every time you make a big play that you will do anything to maintain that drug addiction that you have, right? And so that's the dopamine angle. Now, the financial impact of all this, medical bills, limited earning ability after retirement. A lot of athletes, when they get done playing sports, because you sacrifice everything to be the white man's whatever, uh, they don't develop skill in other areas, and this doesn't happen for everybody. This is not true for every person. If it does not apply to you, then please ignore it. But we all know the guy who sacrificed everything to be a quarterback or a wide receiver or whatever. And I remember Vince Young in 2006. I saw Vince Young, who was one of the greatest quarterbacks in NCAA history. He was on the cover of ESPN the magazine, I believe, and I used to have a subscription. It was delivered to my house, and I looked at the cover of the magazine way back. This is 20 years ago, and it said the quote that they had for him was something like, "I was born to play quarterback for the University of Texas," and it was right after he won the national championship, and he was about to get drafted. And at that moment, I felt very sorry for him. I felt sorry for him because I thought to myself, I said, "My God, so this poor kid really believes." That the reason God put him on this planet is for him to go and play for the University of Texas for free at that time, or not, maybe not completely free because they probably slid him a little bit under the table, but for the most part at that time, college athletes were not getting paid. I advocated for that for over 20 years. And the NCAA never debated me about it. I go on CNN and talk about it, and they would say, well, we called the NCAA to have them send a representative to defend their point of view, but they chose not to. And I'm like, of course they chose not to, because you can't defend the fact that you're stealing people's money. If you're a criminal and you're getting away with a crime, why in the hell are you going to go and defend and explain why you stole what you stole? They know what they're doing. They're stealing wealth from black people. That's what the hell they're doing. And this was my message since you could probably go back and find articles I wrote on this in 1996. And even at that time, the University of Kentucky, one of the players, his name was Derek Anderson. He went on to play for the San Antonio Spurs. One of his black assistant coaches brought him to my office. At that time, I was teaching in the math department at the University of Kentucky, and he had to sneak him to my office. Like literally, like he couldn't tell the coaches that he was even talking to me. And I said, "Is this a plantation? Like, is this 1785 where Negroes aren't allowed to read? Like, what in the world about me makes me a dangerous person for him to talk to?" And basically, it was because they didn't even want the athletes to even consider the fact that they were being robbed. But I guess what made me dangerous was I know the math. I know how to count. I was getting my doctorate in finance. I said, this is how much money that they're making off of you. Also, I tutored athletes, so I knew what the educational consequences were. I knew they weren't really getting the education they deserve. There was a football player I tutored, and he came in. He was going to go to the NFL, and he told me that when he told him he wanted to major in engineering, they told him, well, engineering is going to interfere with your football schedule, so they forced him to pick some stupid major like general studies or something. And then he got injured and wasn't going to go to the NFL, and he didn't have a lot of options. And even 20, 30 years later, I don't think his life turned out all that great, right? And this was a smart kid. His mother had him up in the library. He was reading. He happened to be a great football player, but he was really into education. His mother gave him that, and they took away what his mother gave him and replaced it with the false idol of football because he was a great player. He was good enough to go to the NFL, but they didn't factor in the fact that people get injured, that things don't always go as you plan, that you got to have a plan B. You got to, in fact, your plan B should really be your plan A. The best model, in my opinion, is when Ezekiel Elliott, who played for the Dallas Cowboys, he was the number 4 draft pick, and years ago he came to the All Black National Convention. His father did. Sorry, Ezekiel didn't make it, but his dad did. And his dad explained that he said, "Our son, we never thought our son was going to be a football player. Football was a plan B for our son." He said, we were into the educational side. And that to me is the model. That's the black family model that I love, not the one that says I'm going to give everything so I can hopefully one day become the white man's show horse and go out and play for him and get all this brain damage and everything else, but then have to do it because I can't do anything else. I don't have any other options. These same people telling you that you should never have a fallback plan, they've always got options. They got the E40 had a song years ago, and the chorus of the song was, "They'll find a new nigga next year." Go find it. It's called "To Whom It May Concern." That's the song, "To Whom It May Concern." And shout out to E40. He said they'll find a new nigga next year. So they always got options. If nigga one don't perform, then we got nigga two, nigga three, nigga four, nigga five. They got a whole gang. They got a binder full of Negroes that they can go to. So they always have a plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. So why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? That don't make no damn sense. Never let anybody tell you that you shouldn't have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. That's insanity. That violates the number one rule of investing, which is to not put all your eggs in one basket. Every time we talk about investing, people say, what should I know about investing? First thing, don't put all your money in one place. Never put all your eggs in one basket. That's called diversification. Except here in this case, you're not investing money if you're an athlete or a young black person. You're investing your fucking life. You're investing your time. You're investing your attention. There are a million things you could be great at, but you're choosing this, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're a great wide receiver. Go be a great wide receiver. But what drives me insane is when people don't understand that if you're great at this, there's probably 50 things you could be great at. Like imagine if you took if all the thousands of hours it took to become such a great football player, so if you spent those thousands of hours learning how to be a great entrepreneur or a great investor. Lawrence Eggleston teaches with us in the Black Business School. You know Lawrence. He's coming here before. A lot of people don't know this about Lawrence, but do you know that Lawrence Eggleston, I didn't know this. I was impressed. He was one of the best high school football players in the United States. Did y'all know that? I didn't even know this. So, so this guy, so Lawrence Michael said you're too smart to use the N word. No, nigga, nigga, nigga. That if they see that sometimes they just see us as niggas and we got to call it for what it is. I'm not gonna say it all the time, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna hold back because I'm smart enough to be honest with you. I'm not holding that back. I'm gonna say it like it is. So here's the thing. So Lawrence Eggleston. Let's go back to Lawrence Eggleston. He's not a nigga though. He's a strong black man. Lawrence Eggleston was one of the best high school football players in the United States. He was being recruited by the University of Georgia. Georgia. If anybody knows football, you'll know if you get recruited by Georgia, you got to be a bad boy. And unfortunately for Lawrence, I guess he had an injury and he found out that he had something in his brain such that the doctor said if you go back out on the football field, it could be really bad for you. So Lawrence couldn't play football anymore. So suddenly, this thing he'd invested all of his time into, this thing that he'd really become great at, he couldn't do it anymore. For a lot of people, that's a very dangerous place to be because at that point, you've lost your sense of purpose. And when a man loses his sense of purpose, women too, when you lose your sense of purpose, you just kind of feel like an empty soul, right? You kind of lose your passion sometimes if you're not careful. So it's really important. I think the biggest problem that black people have to deal with is that there are so many people, and they hit on this in the movie Him. In the movie Him, they hit on this. We have millions of our kids that get programmed at birth that to believe falsely that playing a sport is the reason that you're here. That they get groomed, almost like getting groomed to be molested later on in life. Except you're being financially molested, right? So they groom our little boys when they're 5, 6 years old, and they program them into believing that my whole purpose in life is to be a great athlete. I have nothing against being an athlete. I wish I had been a better athlete. I was okay, but I wasn't as great as some of these guys. I respect that. But don't you ever let nobody convince you that your sole purpose in life is to go serve white people on a freaking football field. But this is hard. This is a hard habit to break. They've been doing that to us since slavery. This is the connection to slavery. They tell you what your purpose is. No one should tell you what your purpose is. You should tell them what your purpose is. Right? You drive from the position of power. Like, no, I'm not going to react to what you say about me. I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you about me and let you react to that. You react to that. Dr. Myron Roll, who's now a neurosurgeon, I think he's at Johns Hopkins or Harvard or someplace like that. He also happened to be arguably the best defensive back in the country. That's an example of you taking control. That's an example of you writing your story before somebody else writes the story. And if you got kids, you got to write their story before somebody else does. So never let them just define a black child as just an athlete or just an entertainer. Because again, it's very simple logic. If you're great at sports, you could probably be great at almost anything. You could be great at law, you could be great at medicine, you could be great at business. Why? Why is that? Well, because law, medicine, business, and success in general requires everything that great athletes have. Practicing consistently, having courage under fire, fighting through adversity, playing when you're injured, dealing with competition head on, right? All the things I learned as an athlete, and I wasn't even a great athlete, but I was captain of my track team because my coaches knew that I had heart. That's what I had. I didn't have no speed, but I had heart. I would show up and practice every day. Everybody else practiced 1 time a day. I ran 3 times a day. I would run in the morning, I'd run at practice, and I'd run at night because I wanted to be the best. They saw the attitude. They saw the courage. They saw the commitment. So they said, okay, we want this guy to be the captain. It wasn't my speed. My speed was mediocre. But check this out. Do you know that every single thing I ever did academically, everything I ever did in terms of business, everything I did in almost any situation, even things I applied in my marriage, all came from the attitude I gained from committing myself to sports. Literally everything you learn, sports will teach you everything you need to know about how to be a great black man. You just have to understand that and apply it. Apply it to everything. It's attitude. Attitude is everything. I'm just, just a side note on this. I mean, I'd really encourage you to tell your kids this. Your attitude is everything. And one of the challenges that I have with being black sometimes I feel like there's like this victim attitude or this broken Negro attitude where we just sort of feel like we're the underdogs. You know what I mean? Like I'm not making fun of anybody because yeah, white people screwed you over. They did some terrible stuff to you, but I don't really want to sit around and talk about why we're supposed to lose. I'd rather talk about ways that we can win. And there are some people who will get angry because you're even talking that way. Like, how dare you talk about black people being successful? That's not possible for a lot of us. Why isn't it possible? I mean, I've never met a white man who told me I couldn't read a book. I've never met a white man who told me I couldn't take care of my kids. I've never met a white man who told me I couldn't love my wife or go to the gym or eat better. I've never met a white man who told me I couldn't start a business. I just haven't. Maybe those white people exist, but I've never met them. Right. And if I did meet them, I'd probably kick them in their asses anyway. So my point is to say that I think attitude is something that we can really focus on in terms of really saying, like, okay, what can we do here? So let's go back and let's go back to this. So we were talking about the movie Him. That's what we were supposed to be talking about. But here I am. I'm going in different directions. All right. So let's jump back in. So we were talking about physical and mental trauma of being a professional athlete and how that can impact you financially in different ways. So let's look at the overarching theme of dopamine manipulation. Okay. So let's back this up. Dopamine manipulation, in my view, is one of the most insidious parts of of financial trauma or shall we say, economic despair, right? That's how corporations get you to buy things. That's how people trick you into, falling in love with the wrong person or making bad decisions. So fame, wealth, and power create a really addictive cycle as it pertains to the dopamine that affects your brain. And so the financial impact of that might be that when you're chasing highs, that leads to overspending. And so one of the reasons I'm having Dr. Alicia come into stock market class on Tuesday is because what we find in the research is that is that people overspend a lot of times because there's some emotional void that they haven't addressed. If you watch the movie Him, they hit on that very precisely, where basically when they realize the athlete has the emotional void of losing his father, that drives him to want to be the best football player in the world. And it's because football becomes his safe space. And then what happens is this is what the devil does. The devil will identify not just your greatest desire, but the devil identifies your greatest deficiencies. And so basically what would happen is they'd say, well, don't you want to do this to make your dad proud? Or don't you want to do this to make up for what your father sacrificed for, right? So ultimately, the same thing might happen in other areas, right? So when you talk about chasing highs or overspending, things like that, a lot of times people will make bad financial decisions or bad investment decisions overall because they haven't healed in certain areas, right? So if you go through life with a lot of voids emotionally, it's very easy to manipulate people. Like pimps manipulate prostitutes by taking advantage of voids, perhaps in self-esteem, voids in financial security, voids in education, right? So when you have those voids, it's very easy for people to manipulate you, and I think a lot of our young athletes get manipulated in that particular way. Also, what can happen is that when you talk about chasing dopamine, things like that, you can neglect things like saving and investing. Saving and investing are considered lame and square and boring relative to throwing money in the air or buying a new Gucci belt or whatever. And a lot of that, again, it all everything links back to the dopamine, right? Like if I show up and I'm looking fly and I'm driving a Benz and I'm wearing certain clothes, I'm feeling good. Everybody else is feeling good. They're like, "Oh, Dr. Boyce, look at you, man! Now look at that car!" Right? That's the high that we get, right? Whereas if I just say, "Well, no, I got an extra 100,000 and I put it in my 401k," um, that's not going to really be a great conversation starter at a lot of parties. That's not going to get me the girls if that's what I'm trying to get. So ultimately, the boring stuff though is really where the wealth is located. In fact, even in business, a lot of people that start businesses should consider starting those boring businesses. You'd be amazed how many trillions of dollars are made from simple, boring businesses. Like, how did you make $100 million? Oh, we sell toothbrushes, right? Or my wife was joking about how she met these white people that knew the Obamas, and she said the guy was joking about how rich his family was, and she was like, well, how did your family get so rich? And do you know what he said? He said, my family makes the springs that you put in the bed in the mattress of your bed to keep the bed bouncy. Like that's like they make the spring. Thinks about that. What child grows up dreaming about making the springs that go in the mattress of the bed, right? You don't get that out of the sky. You don't fantasize about that. You inherit that, right? There's a culture around that. He's in that business because his family was in that business before him, and so ultimately, culture plays a big part in what you choose to do with your life. But then also, it's really important to understand that a lot of the money that gets made is the boring money. And where financial consciousness matters for you, in my opinion, where I would suggest that you consider it is to learn how to see all the money around you, right? Like, for example, in this room, I can point to 10 things. Like, here's a little competition. And I want you to try to do this when you get home, or you're already at home because forget we're on the Zoom. But I want you to look around the room. I want you to try to find $10 billion products that are in that room. Ten things that somebody probably made $1 billion selling to the public. Okay, so I'm gonna do it right now. This ink pen, somebody made $1 billion selling this ink pen. This little mouse was made by Hewlett Packard. They made billions of dollars selling these little mouses. These notepad, I got legal pads. They probably made $1 billion selling the legal pad. I got a little case for my glasses. Somebody made $1 billion selling that. I got a stapler. Somebody made $1 billion selling this slit stapler. I got a coffee cup. I bet somebody made $1 billion selling coffee mugs. I got bougie one day and I stayed at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So in order to just hold on to that experience, because I'm not going back because it costs too damn much, I have this water bottle with the Waldorf Astoria on it. I took this as a souvenir. I said, y'all don't took all my money, but I'm at least get this damn water bottle. So I feel fancy when I drink it. So Waldorf Astoria has probably made a few billion, I'm sure. I know that they have. Their renovation was $3 or $4 billion. Here's an AI product. This is an AI note taker. They made $1 billion selling that. Here's a no. That's they probably didn't make a billion because that's no. That's here's a hard drive. This is a or charger. It's a big charger. I like big chargers to charge my phone. Somebody made $1 billion selling this. Oh, and then last one, there's a Western Digital hard drive over here. Somebody made $1 billion selling that, right? So the reason I want you to do that is because that's a great financial consciousness exercise. It helps you to realize that you will probably never in your life ever be in a room where there's not $1 billion in that room. Damn, that's so heavy. Like any room you ever go into, there will probably be $1 billion in that room. Maybe not $1 billion you can access directly, but $1 billion worth of ideas in terms of businesses that people can start. But then also, if you have a room full of people, there's probably a few $1 million in that room. Meaning, if I go, if I go to, I don't know, give a speech or something, I go somewhere and there's like 300 people in the room, and every person has access to $3,000 or something, then that's like a lot of money. I didn't do the math, but it's like $900,000, right? So if I have a business idea that everyone likes, or that we can all, or that a percentage of these people can participate in, or a need I can fulfill, then if those people agree and like what I'm offering, then maybe that's something that can be used to generate or build a business off of that, right? So when you sit with your relatives or you sit with your friends, I want you to practice seeing the money everywhere. And when you start seeing the money everywhere, what'll happen is that you won't just think that money only exists on your paycheck. Money's everywhere. There's a cousin I have, never went to college. You know, you would think that a 30-year-old black man who never went to college would be struggling and having a hard time. And no, he studied, he did computer stuff, and so he's good with the computer, but he's also an entrepreneur. And I was sitting with him, and we were sitting together as a family, and we were talking about ways to make money, just doing those things that I tell you guys about, like forming your own economic elevation circle, where you just have people that you get together and you say, let's just talk and get to know each other and just talk about money and business and just fun, like nothing. Don't put pressure on each other, right? It's just like if you have sex, you don't say, "Well, will you have sex with me today?" No, you just get to know each other and then let things happen, right? So here, so same thing is true before you get into like making financial love with each other. You just gotta like talk and hang out, right? So anyway, with that said, we were sitting there talking, and I'll never forget. I had one cousin who has an MBA, and he makes $250,000 a year. At that time, he did. And he said something like, he said, "Yeah," he said, I always wanted to start a business, but it just seems so hard to come up with an idea that can make money. I don't know, I don't know what to do." And my other cousin, who never went to college, he goes, he just smiles and he goes, "Man, there's money everywhere." And I thought about that. I said, "Isn't that interesting that the cousin that has all the education and the good job can't see the money anywhere other than his job, but the one who doesn't have the good job, didn't get the education, but who's had to be more flexible in his thinking, he sees money everywhere." And I can tell you that the difference shows up in their bank account. That's the same cousin they casually told me that he bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was up at 50,000 or something like that. And we were talking at our family meeting. I said, "Yeah, see, Bitcoin's up to 50,000 now." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, Did you buy Bitcoin?" He said, "Yeah, I bought a few hundred Bitcoin a few years ago when they were like $10 or $20 or something." And I said, "Well, you do know Bitcoin's worth $50,000 a coin now, right?" And he just smiles and he goes, "Wow, that's cool." It's just like that, right? But literally, I think he bought like a couple hundred Bitcoin back in like 2014, just for shits and giggles, just for fun. So he might secretly be sitting on $100 million and he ain't told nobody, which makes him the smartest member of the family. Because if you do make that kind of money, don't go telling everybody, right? So anyway, and if he's listening, just know, nigga, I know you got money, so don't act broke. Don't try to pretend to be broke. All right. So anyway, so let's finish up here. Let's go back to the mind map, and we were talking about the movie Him. and different temptations and vices and bad culture that can destroy you financially. So when you talk about dopamine manipulation, your money will disappear very quickly if you don't learn how to ground yourself and heal, get rid of the voids, and stop using the dope to sort of overcome the voids, right? So examples might be Mike Tyson. If you remember, Mike Tyson earned over $400 million. He lost almost all of it. He's recovering and quite well, and I'm very happy for him. But I again I like the comeback stories, but I also like the stories where you didn't have to come back, right? I don't like us always having to play the game from behind. All right, so here the conclusion for everybody, if you want to walk away and say, okay, this guy's been talking for an hour, what am I supposed to get out of this? First off, financial consciousness can protect you against wealth destruction. This is why our class is called Financial Consciousness, Economic Elevation. I want you thinking up here. I want you analyzing things. I want you looking around, processing things. And so if you do that, then that's how you overcome addictions and bad culture and bad habits is consciousness. When you're consciously thinking about everything you do, you're not operating on autopilot. One of the ways that they keep people broke is the consistent manipulation of your subconscious mind. They want you making decisions on autopilot. In fact, the one most dangerous thing about black people being so consumed by entertainment. Studies show this. Studies, Nielsen, they when they do surveys to determine or to tell companies how to sell products to black people, they mention specifically in their reports that African Americans consume more entertainment than white people do, than any of more than white people, more than Asian people, more than Hispanic people, etc. And the danger of that is that studies show that entertainment reduces the ability of your prefrontal cortex to make logical decisions. So to some extent, entertainment, you got to be really careful because some would argue that it turns your brain into mush. That literally you're not processing things properly. You're following the crowd. You're just doing what's trendy without processing whether or not it's healthy. And that's just the reality, right? So financial consciousness or making an active effort to just think through decisions that are made. Is this really good for me? Is this really what I want, or is this what somebody else wants? Am I really, do I really need to spend this money keeping up with the Joneses, or am I dealing with some sort of emotional deficiency where I feel inadequate or whatever? Maybe I'm not in touch with that emotion. But this is why therapy and stuff like that's so good, because you'll get in touch with that. You'll make a decision and you'll know why you made it. You'll know how you felt because you sat and thought about it, right? So sometimes just thinking about things goes a long way. Also, if you're not grounded, this is the second lesson. If you're not grounded, then all these temptations can erode your health, your wealth, your legacy, everything else. So if you look at the movie Him, what you really saw was in the character development process. Shout out to Jordan Peele. The athlete starts off, he's overly hungry, overly committed, willing to sacrifice everything to have this dream. And then as he's seeing the consequences of the dream, as he's dealing with all the temptations and everything else that comes with that, at the end he changes his mind a little bit, and I'm not going to give the movie away, but you can probably guess what that means. And the last thing is, if you are grounded, then you can build lasting wealth. You can preserve your health, maintain control. People that are grounded spiritually and psychologically tend to just be much better at acquiring wealth and preserving wealth, and they're just better at decision making. Period. Right? Like if you can sit back and just kind of think through. Now, the movie I saw was called Him by Jordan Peele, in case you came in late. So if you process this, right, think about what makes you a better decision maker when you get older. Well, it's because you've seen a few things. You're a little more confident in yourself. You'll think about things before you make decisions. Whereas when you're younger, the temptations be more impulsive, and you want to fit in, and you have these inadequacies you're trying to sort of deal with. And so, really, I think encouraging your children to seek that early goes a really long way, so that when it comes time, when the rubber meets the road, they're going to be a leader, not a follower. That's really important when you talk about something as precious as black wealth, which is connected to so many other issues with the culture. It's really important because some parts of our culture are really, really toxic, right? There's some parts of our culture that are just so anti-wealth, so anti-black. And D1 with the whole hypocritical hop tour is doing a great job confronting that and just kind of saying, why would you why would you cry when a rapper dies, but then you play music that celebrates the death of black people? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so I think asking yourself those questions and not being afraid to do that is one of the critical aspects to not just being truly free, but of really building something, right? And because I can tell you this too, Once you start really building, like once you're building the wealth, I know a lot of you are investing and your money's going up. I know your money's going up because the stock market has been unbelievable. You're going to have people that aren't going to really understand you so much. And then and then also what will happen is once they, and this is why I say don't tell anybody how much money you're making in the stock market. I know how much money some of y'all are making. It's a lot. I wouldn't go tell advertise that, because then what's going to happen is you're going to get pressure from people that are going to sort of lean on pre-existing relationships and make you feel guilty because you didn't overextend yourself to go save this person and bail out that person or pay for everything. And I think just being consciousness will help you to have a balanced way to deal with that. I don't think you should abandon your family. They love you. They were there with you when you were broke. But at the same time, managing wealth is a it's a heavily conscious decision when you got to look at your resources, assess your risks, figure out what you can afford and can't afford, and be confident enough to say, I can't afford that. I got to be more balanced. Thank you, Levon. That's a great term. I got to be more balanced. I can't give you $5,000, but I can give you 1,000. Right? So you're showing love. You may run into that cousin who just doesn't get it. Who might say, "Why would you only give me 1,000 when I know that you made $100,000 in the stock market this year?" That's when you might have to say, well, it's none of your damn business. I'm sorry. This is what I'm going to do. I love you. And that's the other, that's the hardest part too. That's always been hard for me. That affected me. Like that was new trauma for me, to be honest with you. I already had my old trauma, but then the new trauma is when you finally have something and just managing, fighting off all the people that are asking for stuff, and then accepting within yourself, you can't save everybody. You can't be there for everybody, Boyce. You have to pick and choose. You have to pick your battles. You have to, this other person's gonna be mad at you. You have to be okay with that. That's hard. It's like so if you have like say a deficit where you feel the need to please everyone, then it's going to drive you crazy, right? So get the healing, fix yourself, right? So you can be a great leader. A lot of you are supposed to lead. You're leading your children, you're leading your families. You are, again, if you've been coming to class, if you come to even 20 classes, you're probably the most financially educated person in your family. There's a good chance of that. So you are by default a leader. Right. So leadership requires responsibility. Great power requires great responsibility. Your responsibility, in my view, my suggestion, not a mandate, is work on yourself so you can truly lead people to a better life and do it in the right way, because that's a whole new skill set that we should acquire, and white people are not going to train you to get that. You got to do that yourself. Okay. All right, so anyway, I'm going to go on Tuesday. The stock market investing club meets. If you want to join us and do a free trial, you can go to drboycestockmarket.com. Dr. Alicia is going to come in on Tuesday and do a complete healing seminar on how to diagnose and how to address any trauma issues you have so that you can become a better investor. So that's going to be Tuesday at noon. So if you want to join us, just go to drboycestockmarket.com. Also, if you're not on the text list for this class, you can text the word morning to the number 87948. I'll send you an invitation tomorrow. Last but not least, I'd be curious to know what you guys think about the mind map. Did you guys like that when I pulled that up and laid it out there? Tell me what you think. Did that help you kind of see stuff, the visual? Did you feel like, yeah, that was good? Or were you like, oh, this is stupid, like stop that stuff? Okay, if you guys like it, then I'll do it again. And maybe one day I'll just take a formal poll and let you guys vote on it. And in fact, actually, why don't we just do it now? If you want to stick around, I'll put the poll up now. All right. So I'm gonna call this mind map, and I'm gonna basically ask a simple question: did you like the mind map? And the answers are simple, yes and no. So there we go. All right, so let me see if I can pull this up, and I'm gonna put this in here. If you don't see the poll and you're not inside the Zoom, text the word morning to the number 87948 and you can come in. And so if you guys can answer that for me really quick, I just want to get an assessment as to whether or not you guys liked it. And if you don't like it, I'm not gonna do it anymore. All right, and so far it looks like a lot of you liked it. It's 98% to 2%. And this will like one person said no, or two people said no. Okay. So the no's, there's two of them. All right. But everybody else said yes. So it looks like the yeses have it. So I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. And so it's 96% to 4%. So to the 4% who said no, I'm sorry, we have to run a democracy here. So you will see the mind map again. You won't see it every single time, but if there are a long list of thoughts I want to lay out for you, I'll just do it that way. That way you have something visual you can screenshot and sort of process with your kids. With today's conversation, I think really, if you have sons, I would encourage you to consider finding a condensed way to show this to your sons, or they can watch the whole video if you want to give them the whole video. But um, I would encourage you to show that to them so that they can make decisions as men about the temptation of sports and how to kind of navigate that. Because I personally would have benefited from this when I was 16 or 17 years old. All right. So anyway, have a good day, everybody. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and have a good one.